Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Heal with Kat podcast. My name is Kat, and I am your host, and welcome back to another week here on the channel. And if you are new here, welcome. If you are not new here, welcome back. I'm so happy to have everybody here this week. And this week's episode comes as a highly requested episode. It is not on the spiritual path per se, but it's an episode that I think everyone's been kind of wanting to hear a little bit more about. I feel like in my community and my friends and even my family, there's like these gut issues that are kind of being put on blast this year. Of course, I believe that like what's happening in our collective affects us individually and vice versa. So I'm kind of not surprised, but also at the same time, it is interesting to think about how, one person kind of voices an issue with something, and then all these other people start being like, oh, maybe I feel this too. I guess that's what an awakening is. But yeah, it's going to be kind of an interesting episode today. I definitely don't have any notes or any plans. I'm just going to speak from the heart and from the gut. Just winked at the camera. And I'm just so cheesy. And yeah, I'm just going to kind of tell you guys my life experience with this gut stuff, because what I can tell you from just experience and all of the research and the kind of just everything I've been through with the gut issues, it definitely didn't just start. It's been happening for a very long time, and I'm just now 33 years old waking up to the kind of implications of what the Western medical system has imposed on my body, and also the emotional components to it, how I used a functional medicine doctor to help heal my gut, and how it continues. Because unfortunately, I wish I could tell you that I did 6 months of a detox and my gut issues are better and I'm all done and it's fixed, but it kind of doesn't work like that. And I don't believe that you can fix a 30 plus year issue in 6 months. This stuff is going to take time. So I'm just going to speak vulnerably and from the heart, and we'll see where it takes us. You may want to grab a pen and a paper if you want to take some notes, because I'm going to literally word vomit dump everything I have learned on my experience in this episode. So with that, let's jump right in. So I said that I was going to start like at the beginning of everything, which, you guys, first and foremost, this has been the wildest 6 months of research of my life. I have learned so much about the human body, emotionally and physically, and a lot about bacteria in the last 6 months. And my story with gut issues actually starts at a very young age, at 5 years old, around 5 years old. And I'm going to speak from the physical perspective, not from the emotional one, because we'll get to that later. But facts of the physical is that at 5 years old, I contracted something called scarlet fever, which is hilarious to say out loud because people joke that it's like a Victorian type of like a illness, or like a pirate illness or something that people like don't get anymore. Although the other day I was scrolling TikTok and somebody actually posted that they had these like weird bumps and rashes and they got diagnosed with scarlet fever. So I guess it's still like ruminating around the world, but it's really, really rare to get. And somehow I got it when I was 5 years old. And I have vivid memories of me as a kid, like being in the bath with like this pink powder in it. And I remember just being itchy and feeling really sick. And it was a really, it just sucked. I remember it being really uncomfortable. So that was kind of like the first memory that I had that started bringing up all these other memories of things that have happened to me in childhood. And I promise we're going to get to like a fact, like a theory that I have. So just like stick along the journey. So fast forward a few years, and I think between the ages of like, I want to say like 8 and like 13 or 14, probably like 13, I would get strep throat every single year, multiple times a year. Like to the point where by the time I turned 13 or 14, the doctor was like, if you get strep throat again, I'm going to have to take your tonsils out. And I was so deathly afraid of getting those tonsils taken out and having surgery. I don't know what happened, but like I stopped getting strep throat. However, I do know that it started manifesting in other places of my body. And then around 18 years old, I was exploring things physically with other people. And I lost my virginity and I had a boyfriend that was cheating on me. And around that time that I found out he was cheating on me, I contracted something called a strep B. So Streptococcus B, which is a female reproductive organ bacterial overgrowth of strep in the body. And it is the most uncomfortable thing I think I've ever had in my life, truly, besides my period cramps, which I'm going to get to that too. But it's like this vaginal itching, and we're going TMI, that is so painful and burns and itches and nothing helps. I mean, nothing. And the way to treat it back in the day was antibiotics. So for strep throat, I had antibiotics. For my scarlet fever, I had antibiotics and steroid creams. For my strep B, I had steroid creams and antibiotics. So I somehow glaze over the strep B. I get into my 20s and my endometriosis flares up. So I got my period when I was 9 years old. I was like one of the first girls to get it. And my cramps were like seemingly normal for the first like 3 years of my period. And then I got to high school, like 8th grade to high school. And those cramps came on so intensely. That's when I started fainting and throwing up and having these excruciating period pains with like a lot of clotting. And it would take me out for a day or two. And this was really young. I mean, 13, 14, like that's young. Like, and I was in bed taking a leave and my mom would bring me a heating pad and I would just be in the most debilitating pain. And no one took me to the doctor, which I'm a little salty about still, but no one took me to the doctor and no one said, you know, what's wrong? If they did, the doctor was like, period cramps, just like give her some Aleve and she'll get through it. So already the Western medical system is just putting Band-Aids on me and not really getting at the root cause. And so the strep throat, the scarlet fever, the strep B, and then you've got these crazy painful period cramps. They all had something in common that I wasn't aware of yet. But I share this with you again to paint the bigger picture of what I've realized what was going on. So at 21, I meet my ex-husband, and within the first month of meeting him, I faint and throw up at my grandma's house from painful period cramps. I haven't been diagnosed with endometriosis yet. I haven't even seen a doctor about it my entire life. But I had been on and off birth control, and I'd also been on antidepressants since I was 16 because I saw a really traumatic car accident with a Chargers football player, a drunk driving accident, where his name was Terrence Keel. He died in front of me and my friends, and it was really traumatic. And that's when I first realized that I had depression and there was some mental health stuff. You know, at that point, I had also had an eating disorder for a few years. So like, we're just like tacking on the things, okay? My grandma takes me to the hospital and she's like, enough is enough. We got to figure out what's going on. Well, my grandma had endometriosis. She had a hysterectomy around my age. So she probably thought something was going on. She knew that she also had painful cramps, but you know, no one was really like talking about it like it was serious. Like people would be like, oh yeah, grandma had this or grandma had that. But there was no like action taken behind it. There was no like, we got to figure out what's going on and get you a cure. It was kind of like, this is the card that you're dealt. You have this painful period stuff. Like you're just going to have to deal with it for the rest of your life. And so I go to the hospital and I remember texting my ex-husband because we were just dating. And I said, I just fainted and threw up. I'm in the hospital and I get really painful periods. And I kind of started telling him about what was going on. He goes, oh, my family friend is a really good OBGYN at this hospital in San Diego. Let me ask for her number and you should go and see her. Well, this lady, you know, there's been so many people that I've met on my journey. This lady was actually the woman that diagnosed me with endometriosis, and she took a very interesting approach to navigating my endometriosis without giving me surgery. She admitted me into the hospital for a week, and she basically said that she was going to use antibiotics through an IV to flush out anything in my body that was contributing to the endometriosis. The interesting thing is, yes, I'm grateful that she diagnosed me with endo. And also, every single person, including functional medicine doctors, that I've told her approach of how she tried to heal my endo, they're like, what the hell did she do? Like, so I have this crazy picture of me that maybe I'll share on social, of me in the hospital at 21. And I have 4 different IVs in me, in 4 different IVs in my body, because my body could not handle the amount of antibiotics that were going in my body in one IV. It was like my arm was getting really inflamed and hot, and I was breaking out in hives, and I found out I was allergic to doxycycline and Recephin, these 2 medications, and I broke out in these crazy rashes. I left the hospital, and the doctor somehow deemed me like good enough to leave. I went home and I had a period for 3 months straight. It was the most taxing experience of my life. And so the doctor goes, oh, your body doesn't know how to regulate itself. I don't know what that means. I'm going to put you on birth control, and you're never going to get a period again. And you're going to stay on this birth control until you're ready to have kids. Then that same doctor, prescribes me the birth control, and I never fucking hear from her again. Apparently, I had to ask my ex-husband's family. She jetted off to India, renounced her title in Western medicine, went to some training for Eastern medicine in India, and literally, I was with my ex-husband for 8.5 years, never heard from her again. It was the weirdest experience. I happened to see a doctor who was of the Eastern philosophy, but practiced Western medicine. And she said, I'm going to continue prescribing you the birth control because it seems like it's helping. Well, I wasn't getting a freaking period. So yeah, no wonder it was helping. But she diagnosed me with a gluten, dairy, soy, peanut, and walnut allergy. And she said, you've got some thyroid issues. A lot of people have found success in managing their thyroid by cutting out inflammatory foods. Okay. So I cut out the inflammatory foods. Meanwhile, I still had a raging eating disorder. I mean, I was all over the place. Fast forward to 24, I go to an outpatient facility for an eating disorder. I'm on birth control. I have a lot of mental health issues, and I'm being pushed around in the system, basically. And I get to the outpatient facility on the first or second day, and they go, oh, we have a new psychiatrist who's here. And she has this life-changing medicine that helps people to stop binging and restricting, which is what I was doing. And it's going to help rewire your brain and suppress the parts of your brain and give you different chemicals in your brain to stop those urges. So I meet with the doctor. I can still see her in my mind's eye so clearly. Blonde, older, maybe in her 50s, short hair, very masculine energy. She doesn't even ask me that many questions. She's already got the prescription ready for me. She goes, you binge and restrict? Okay, here you go. I can't for the life of me remember any of the names of the medications I was on, and I'm okay not to remember them. I think the only one I remember I was on was Wellbutrin, and that was for a very short amount of time. And I had been going on and off the antidepressants, like irresponsibly playing with them, like, oh, I need them here, oh, I don't need them here, contributing to my mental health issues. I remember telling her that I was playing with my medication, and she says to me, you cannot play with this medication. This medication is actually an anti-seizure medication. And if you stop taking it abruptly, you will have a seizure and you could die. And I was like, okay, like this is some serious shit. But it felt good to be seen in some fucked up way because they were seeing my issue and they were trying to fix it. My sovereignty in my body did not come for much longer. I was, again, thrown into the system, pushed around, told what I needed to do, told what was good for me, and I believed it. I did. I believed it because I was not taught to question the system or to take my health into my own hands. I was never empowered to be healthy. I was empowered for other things, but not to be sovereignly healthy in your body. So my ex-husband had to watch me the first few days of taking this medicine, go to sleep, because the likelihood of me having a seizure taking this medication within the first 30 minutes before bed, which is when I had to take it, it was like at an increased risk. So I'd take them, I'd fall asleep whenever that was, and he would just sit there, scroll his phone, and wait for 30 minutes until I was asleep. And I actually feel really bad for him because that's a lot of pressure to put on one single human being. So I was on that medication plus the birth control and trying to heal from my eating disorder, which, to be honest with you, I left my outpatient facility and I had a worse eating disorder than when I went in with. So the medication wasn't doing shit because I learned 20 new ways how to have an eating disorder by all the girls there who were way off. They way worse than me in terms of their fragility with their eating disorder and the tactics that they had to have an eating disorder. So I learned a lot in there. And when I left, I was a shell of myself and I gained 35 pounds and didn't even realize it until somebody took a photo of me at a birthday party. And I was like, holy shit, what happened to me? Where did I go? You know, that like funny, like old TikTok thing where the girls post that they like gained weight or they're pregnant. They're like, Jessica. Like that was me. I like looked in the mirror and I was like, what happened to me? That's kind of where I hit like a block in terms of my health. And I started to kind of wake up a little bit and I was like, wait a second. Something's not right here. I'm not actually that healthy. I mean, I do all these things to be healthy, quote unquote, but I'm not actually that healthy. And I think something needs to change. So I got a trainer at the 24-hour fitness near my house. And I'll never forget, her name was Lacey, and she was a godsend. She pushed me, but I lost a lot of the weight. And again, she did not have the medical knowledge to figure out the depth of what else was going on with me. But she helped me learn how to work out and start taking care of myself. And it was this very slow journey of trying to learn how to take care of myself. In the midst of all of this, I'm still taking birth control. I'm taking this medication. I'm sick all the time. I've eliminated all of these foods from my diet. So I barely eat anything anymore. And it's a mess. Like I'm just depressed all the time. I'm super unhappy in my relationship. I've got this cool job that asks me to do cool stuff and I'm with my family all the time. So I'm just like hanging on by a freaking thread. And I turned 27 or 28. I'm so bad with remembering this stuff. I think I was 28. And my ex-husband and I are like, we need to get divorced. Like, this isn't working. Like, our relationship is an absolute disaster. Like, we can't continue like this. And there were a few other things that were happening medically in my body that were preventing me from reaching certain points where I wanted to be, that I had just kind of decided, okay, well, if we're going to separate and I'm going to be on my own, and my job at the time had offered me to travel like every other week to do events and wine tastings and social media stuff. I was like, I need to get off this medication. Something in me was like, I remember sitting on my bed and thinking to myself, I don't feel like myself. And I know that medication like stunts your personality. It like tries to like numb you out. I'm just going to just get off of this and see how it goes. So my ex-husband watched me before I went to bed for 30 minutes every single night for like a week. And then we decided it was time to split. And I moved in with my uncle for a couple days before I got the courage to tell my dad. And then I told my dad, and then I moved in with my dad. It's kind of like back and forth. But at least I was off that medication, canceled the prescription. I felt really fucking good about it. My cousin Lelia really empowered me to get off of it too. I have to say that. She really empowered me for a lot of things in that time of my life. I needed that super, super badly. So there's one thing that I was checking off the checklist. Okay, let's get the medication out of the body. Step number one. Fast forward a year later, I moved to San Diego. I'm on birth control. It's the middle of COVID. I'm divorced. I'm dating. I am starting to, again, open my eyes to some of the kind of spiritual warfare happening within the medical field and sovereignty around bodies and making choices for ourselves. There's a lot of things I'm starting to like become aware of. I don't act on them, and I don't necessarily know if I believe them, but I'm starting to become aware of it. The Western medical health system is starting to show itself to me in a way where I'm like, something's not working here. I've been taking all these medicines. I've been doing everything the doctors are telling me, and I don't feel any better. I actually feel worse. So I decided to get off birth control. I'm like, you know what? I'm reading all these things about birth control. Not only is it not good for you, I'm not sexually active right now. I just came out of 8.5 years of a relationship. Yes, I'm dating, but like, I'm not dating like that. Like, I'm very careful about who is around my energy, who gets access to my energy. I was dating, but it wasn't that serious. I had heard that who you're attracted to is very affected by pheromones, and your birth control throws off your hormones, which affects your pheromones. So you could be attracted to somebody who's like really not good for you based off of being on birth control. And there was like scientific studies behind this. So I was like, getting off this thing. So I got off of it. First symptom I had, extremely painful periods. They were back. Well, duh. I hadn't had a period in freaking like 8 years. So no wonder. But my head had no, like, I was so naive. I had no clue that this stuff was actually like affecting me like that. And so I was like, oh my God, why do I have painful periods all of a sudden? Because the birth control was never supposed to fix you. It was supposed to put a Band-Aid on this shit. So anyways, I'm like talking to myself, like old me. So much compassion for her. Just like, oh, sweet little cat, like had no clue. But you don't know what you don't know. That was like my motto back then. I didn't know what I didn't know, but now I know. So then the second symptom that came around was cystic acne. Lord God, help me with the cystic freaking acne. It was the biggest kill to my confidence. I went on spironolactone, again, still battling with like maybe the medical system will help me. Maybe I've been gaslit for the last 30 freaking years of taking care of my body, and maybe spironolactone will help me. So no, it doesn't fucking help me. I already have low blood pressure. It lowers my blood pressure even more. So I was like, okay, I need to get off of this. So I got off of that. So first time in my life, I am antidepressant free. I am birth control free. I am any other medication free. And my body had a fucking field day, literally purging. I remember I went to go see my Reiki healer in Encinitas, Marcella, who I adore. If you're in San Diego and you want a Reiki healer, you have to go see Marcella. DM me on Instagram. I'll send you her information. She is the best. And I got this crazy rash across my throat. It looked like somebody had slit my throat, and there was like bunching and scarring. I mean, I have pictures on Instagram if you scroll like way the fuck back in my feed. And it was like this rash that just kept getting worse and worse. So what do? I'm going to go see a dermatologist, and they're going to give me a cream for it. So I go get my cream, I get a steroid cream. I put it on for a week. They told me within 3 to 4 days it should go away. Did not budge. It got worse. It started to flake like eczema, like off. And it was like, I was embarrassed to go out in public. Luckily it was during COVID, but I couldn't put a mask over my throat. I had a mask over my face, and it was just, so embarrassing. So I go see my Reiki healer, and I'm like, I've had this really weird thing. And she goes, Catherine, do not put topical steroid cream on your body, especially on your throat when you've got thyroid issues. She was like, here's what you're going to do. You're going to juice celery juice, 16 ounces a day, every single morning. The minute you wake up, you go to the bathroom, you have a bowel movement, and then you stick to your gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, whatever. I was like, great. Within 4 days, the rash was gone. Completely gone. Completely gone. Tossed the steroid cream. And that was probably the last time that I ever thought about going back to Western medicine for anything. At that point, I was like, I'm done here. Like, this fucked me and I'm done. I started introducing gluten, dairy, soy, and peanuts back into my diet because I kind of went a little rebellious and was like, well, fuck everything Western doctors have ever told me. I don't trust anything that they've said. And so I introduced all these foods back into my diet. I was drug-free and I was eating all of these foods and I was drinking quite a bit. And I will say that it probably took me about 3-ish years to start seeing the effects of what that was doing to my body. And on top of that, I don't methylate. I have the MTHFR gene, which basically inhibits my body's ability to detox properly. The detox pathways of my body do not function on their own properly. And I was not taking anything for this. So I was building up these toxins in my body over and over and over again for years. And the acne was getting worse, and I was getting little eczema patches, and I was really lethargic all the time. And it took me days to like get over like drinking, and like I would get really bloated, and then the burping started to happen. I went to go see a functional doctor in San Diego. She brought up nothing of my medical history and never gave me a stool test. She basically told me that my ferritin levels are really low, and ferritin is the protein that binds to iron that helps you build iron in your body. So I'm not anemic. I just have low ferritin. And she said, this is the root of all of your problems. Your period cramps are painful because you don't have enough iron. This is happening because you don't have enough iron. Oh, and you need more vitamin D. And the cystic acne is a hormonal thing. We'll fix that over time. Well, that over time timeline was going to start, and we were moving to Colorado. So the painful periods had continued, but it did start to slowly like shift. Like it wasn't, instead of every month, it was like every couple of months was really painful. And then, I'd have a good month and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I wonder what I did differently. Well, I was working out a lot more, and Tyler's an extremely healthy person. So I was just like constantly eating healthier and not eating out and not drinking as much. So there was like a lot of really positive benefits, obviously, in the beginning of our relationship. And I could see that was sort of helping. I started to get lymphatic drainage massages. I think that was helping a lot. And seeing this functional doctor and kind of like taking some of these supplements, I think were helping a little bit, but it wasn't getting to the root cause. So I share all of this with you because what I really am trying to say is what I've realized in the last 6 months is that at the root cause of all of my issues is a streptococcus overgrowth of bacteria in my body from the scarlet fever at 5 years old. And the root cause was never addressed. And so it kept showing up as strep in my throat. And then it was strep B, the vaginal strep, which is, by the way, genetic. I think my mom said she had it. There's nature and nurture in all of this. And then I introduced antidepressants at 16, ruined my gut lining, birth control for 10 years. Don't even get me started on the side effects of that. So my body had just been slowly breaking down over time. Medication after medication after medication. My liver wasn't functioning. In college, I used to get these wild kidney infections where I would end up in the hospital for like a couple of days. And they finally, like, it was bad. They were like, you need to figure out what's going on. Like, you're here all the time. And I was like, my doctor says, like, stop drinking soda. And they were like, what the fuck? When I moved to Denver, I was looking for a functional medicine doctor, someone better than who I had been seeing in San Diego. And my incredible acupuncturist, Lane, who I adore, she said, go see Dr. Caitlin. So I book a session with Dr. Caitlin. She's got like a 3-month wait list. Somehow I get in early. I sit down with Dr. Caitlin, who's a functional medicine doctor, for 30 minutes. Okay, the whole appointment is 90 minutes. But in the first 30 minutes, she tells me, tell me about your history. I tell her everything I just told you, but a very condensed version, like very condensed. And she says, have you ever done a stool test? And I was like, no. And she was like, no doctor has ever had you do a stool test. And I was like, no. She's like, okay, well, that's number one that we're going to do. She goes, looking at all of your symptoms, I think that your endometriosis may be getting kind of like aggravated by a strep bacteria in your body that you've had since you were a kid. And I actually think I can help you not only get rid of the painful periods, I think you might have SIBO. She's like, you may have a couple other things, you might have parasites, but like, let's just say we're going to look for something going on in your gut, and we're going to start with a stool test. And I was like, holla freaking Luya. I walk out of there on cloud freaking 9. I get my stool test, and you guys, if you've ever done a stool test, what an experience. What an intimate experience with yourself. It's like you're up close and personal with you and everything about you. I sent it off, and when I sent it off, I started to feel this inner knowing within me that I call my intuition, where I was like, I think I need to go gluten and dairy free again. I just, there's something about lifestyle that feels really big for me here. I started looking into the medical medium. He has this whole spiel on his website about strep overgrowth in the body, and I had every single symptom and then some. And he says gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, if you can, alcohol-free, and majority of sugars free. So I went back to the roots of what I knew to do for my body, and then basically just started this process. And what I will say is that my number one symptom that I will say, besides the painful periods and all the things that I've mentioned, I had horrible constipation. Some weeks I went once a freaking week. Once a week. Could you imagine? Once a week? Once a week I would go. If I was lucky, I'd go 3 to 4 times a week. So that was like symptom number one. Along with that comes bloating and indigestion, acid reflux, and a loss of appetite. I never really knew if I was hungry or not. Massive upper GI bloating. So like my upper stomach felt really like inflamed all the time. And then the number one thing that I had to like really hone in on her SIBO diagnosis or potential SIBO diagnosis before the stool sample was burping. I was burping all the time, like an insane, disgusting amount, like where my boyfriend was starting to notice. And I was like, oh, this is so embarrassing. Like, but I would eat and I would just burp, and it was just like coming out of me and I couldn't stop. It had gas, and yeah, it was just really uncomfortable. So it was kind of all of that. So I start the medical medium stuff, and I realize it's not really doing much. It's helping. I'm not feeling so tired, like I've cut out all these inflammatory foods, but I just continued to do that. And I was like, I'm just going to do this until I get the stool sample back. I get the stool sample back, and she calls me and she goes, you have SIBO and you have big time inflammation in your gut. She's like, you need to research SIBO. I need you to take intestinal tract, which is like all herbs. So we went the herb route. I did not go the antibiotic route. Antibiotics have not served me well in my life. And I don't think that antibiotics are the smartest thing to put in your body when you've got gut issues. However, I will say that that is not the case for everyone, because I know people who are very naturally inclined, who had such bad gut issues, they needed antibiotics. So every single human being is different, and I'm not going to judge somebody. No judgment to that. But for me, I didn't have to go on antibiotics, and I was like, I want to try the natural route first. So my doctor had me on intestinal tract herb defense. That's like a full script, like a doctor has to prescribe it for you. She said to continue cutting out all of these foods. And then she had me on something called Iberogast, which is actually something you can buy on Amazon. Anybody can buy it. I just saw a commercial for it during some big thing on TV. I don't remember what I was watching. But Iberogast is a herb tincture that you put like droplets in like a little shot glass, and they put some water and just throw it back before a meal, after a meal, and then before bed. I highly recommend it if you have GI issues, because it helps with nausea, bloating, indigestion, burping, all of that. And it's harmless. It's just herbs. You take it a couple times a day and that's it. And like I said, I get it on Amazon, so it's wonderful. And so I was on the Iberogast, and she had me on some butyrate or butitrate or butyrate or something like that. So majority of the things that she put me on, you have to get through a functional doctor who has to prescribe them for you. But the ibuprofen is not. So that was phase one. She's like, phase one, we just need to rid the body of these toxins. And the last thing she had me go on was an antiviral or I think it's antimicrobial, antifungal. Oh God, one of the ones, oil of oregano. You guys, I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice, and I am not a medical professional. I should have said that in the beginning. But I took oil of oregano, a few drops in some tea every night for a month. The die-off symptoms were horrific. After 3 p.m., I was a zombie. I remember one day I was supposed to host, my neighbor invited me so sweetly to join her book club, and I was going to have all the girls at my house. And I was like 3 weeks into the detox, and I was like, 3 o'clock rolled around. They were supposed to come at like 4:30 or 5 or something. And I had to text them and be like, I am glued to this couch. I literally can't even think straight. The brain fog is so bad. I have to cancel. And I was really trying to push through, but it was really bad. I mean, I felt like I was detoxing from all angles. The joint pain was actually getting a bit inflamed during the detox. Things got worse before they got better. Then I saw her for phase 2. And as I entered phase 2 in July, and each phase is about 3 months, I started to actually feel better. The period cramps were like very, very low. That was like the biggest win of all. But I still was feeling the bloating, the burping, the exhaustion. There was like something else that I wasn't feeling my best. So I go and see her, and she's like, all right, we're going to stop all of phase 1. I want you to continue taking the ibuprofen, but we're going to drop in some L-glutamine. And I also want you to do digestive enzymes. And she prescribed me a couple other things. And that's when I started looking into the carnivore diet. The doctor had kind of explained to me, that the SIBO probably came from this, and it's probably happening because of that. And I bought this incredible book that I'll link in the show notes called Healing SIBO by Siobhan Sarna. And I learned a lot about SIBO in that first phase just by reading about it in that book, what kind of gas I'm producing. If I'm constipated, I have methane. If I have diarrhea, I have hydrogen, like just kind of the ways that the body like works, like this innate intelligence in the body to try to heal itself and work things out. And basically I just needed to mitigate and cut out probiotics, like cut out fermented foods, like anything that was going to create more bacteria or more movement or growth in my lower intestine had to be taken out completely. Fiber was actually kind of disruptive for my gut for a little bit as well. Like introducing more vegetables and fruit into my diet kind of disrupted the system a little bit. But phase 2, I was like, I'm feeling better. I'm doing better, but we still have kind of a long road to go. I'm like just curious what else I can learn about SIBO. So I'm sitting in bed and I'm scrolling YouTube about SIBO things. And I come across like 5 different videos with like top views, how the carnivore diet healed my SIBO. Well, I was dairy free at the time. So when I say carnivore diet, I didn't do the full like keto carnivore diet. I was basically just increasing my intake for meat. Also, somebody who struggles with ferritin and low iron, I was like, I see benefits from all sides to introduce meat into my diet more often. The one thing that I learned about SIBO is that at the root cause of SIBO is a lack of stomach acid production. And stomach acid is supposed to break down the food in your stomach, turn it into nutrients, absorb what it needs, and then through bowel movements, you excrete the rest. There's this ileocecal valve that's supposed to open and close, and sometimes that can have some trauma of its own. With SIBO for many years, I don't actually know what is going on with my ileocecal valve. I haven't looked into that, but I think that's kind of like a farther down the road thing. I just knew that by listening to these podcasts and reading this book and kind of doing my own research, that I had low stomach acid, which is why we started introducing in phase 2 some more. She said, get on this probiotic. I couldn't do it. It was way too painful for my stomach. But I was starting to eat like fermented kimchi, and I was starting to do a little kombucha here and there. And I introduced digestive enzymes and the apple cider vinegar. And I started to notice a little bit of levity with it. It wasn't life-changing, but a little bit. It's a slow process. And the number one thing I heard with the carnivore diet, or just introducing meat into your diet more than usual, more often, more regularly, is that meat helps create stomach acid and helps create more bile in the stomach. contrary to popular belief, people that have acid reflux don't have an excess of acid. They actually have low acid that's trying to overproduce, and it's getting like it's not in a healthy contained environment. So I was like, I don't really eat meat that much, but I do love a good filet. So I became the filet queen for like 3 months. I was doing brisket. I was doing filet. I was doing, you name it, red meat. I mean, I was doing, which I still love, Force of Nature ground ancestral blend of like the liver, the heart, and the organs, and then in the ground meat, which does wonders for your skin, your hair, your nails, the iron health of your body, producing iron, and just all of the benefits. And I had more energy than I could even contain. I was so energetic, and I was sleeping well, and my acne started to really clear up, and a lot of things were really going really well. And I was like, okay. So I posted that reels on Instagram about the carnivore diet, and it blew up. To be fair, I wasn't doing the true carnivore diet with like dairy and stuff, but I was still eating a shit ton of meat every single day and loving it. It was like my Roman Empire. I literally could not stop talking about it because it was so impactful. I went to Italy for a month, and I introduced dairy, gluten, soy, all these things, alcohol, wasn't eating a lot of red meat, a lot of gelato, a lot of pizza, a lot of pasta. And I thought, it's Italy. I'm probably going to have some gut issues, but the food is healthier. I'm just going to continue my supplements and just eat whatever I want. And I actually did okay. I did fine. And then I came back. The burping came back tenfold. The stomach inflammation came back tenfold. I would have good days and I would have bad days. And you just depended on what day I was in and where I was on my cycle and how I was sleeping. I mean, I was just thrown back into the lion's den of like, what is going on? So I went to go see my doctor a couple of weeks ago, and she said that she thinks that, like I thought, the motility of my gut was already just starting to heal. And then I kind of threw these things back into the mix. So we kind of have to like address it from a different way now. She actually diagnosed me with H. pylori. She's going to treat me for it. It wasn't like an official diagnosis, but she's like, it sounds like you have H. pylori. Which is like parasitic in nature, and gastritis because of the inflammation in my gut, and the burping was back like really bad. So now I'm on a whole different 6-week protocol for that. And that's fine because it's just introducing 2 more supplements into the mix of like the other 5 that I take. But it's like an ongoing process. But the carnivore diet was really beneficial for me. But unfortunately, I've reached the point now where I can't look at meat anymore. Like, if I went out to a nice restaurant, if I went to Ruth Chris and they were like, would you like a filet? I'd be like, hell yeah, because it's Ruth Chris. But like, do I want to be buying a $30 filet like a few times a week? It's absolutely not cost effective. And like, yes, I could make like brisket and things like that, but you just kind of get sick of eating the meat all the time. You're like, oh, okay, like I need a chicken thigh or something, So now I'm on this like chicken thigh kick. Yeah, but anyways, so it kind of just got a little old. And I think that's the hard part with healing SIBO and healing gut issues, is that like you get fixated and hooked on these certain things that you think are really going to help you. And then you kind of just like get sick of hyperfixating on them. And you're like, oh, now what do I do? Like, it's just kind of like this constant like ebb and flow. So that's the physical part of what I've been navigating. Obviously, it's been quite a journey. I'm not on any medications today. Thank God, knock on wood. I feel so grateful for that. And yes, do I feel like I have finally gotten to a place where a medical professional has finally looked me in the eyes and said, this is what I think you have. And then she was right. And then I start to feel better. Like, that's life-changing for me. But as with everything, I believe that with every physical dis-ease that we have, there is also an emotional one that needs to be addressed as well. 5 years old has come up a lot for me in a lot of my healings in the last year. And so it feels significant that something at 5 years old was definitely prevalent and happening within me when I contracted scarlet fever. And then it just kind of like created this story in my body of the way that I was going to be sick until I took it into my own hands, per se. And, I think that there is a little bit of like, I wish I could tell you that I'm all healed and everything is better and I'm on cloud nine. That's not the case. But like I said earlier in the episode, you can't undo 30 plus years of this stuff in 6 months. It's going to be a couple of years probably. And then some, I may have to be gluten and dairy free and, some sugar free for the rest of my life. Like, that is a sacrifice I will make to keep myself healthy. So the emotional perspective, the emotional components of this, obviously the first thing I look at is the solar plexus. What is going on with my power center, my trust in myself and my confidence, but also why am I holding all my stress here? Your solar plexus is a place of personal power. It's the place in the chakras where the first three and the bottom two meet. So you get divine inspiration and you get grounded action, and then it becomes personal power through the solar plexus. But our solar plexus is actually not supposed to be our compass or our place of where we make decisions. That is the heart. A mentor of mine a long time ago told me that my compass is my heart. And if I wanted to find success in life, in my relationships, in my personal choices, in my beliefs, and what I do, I need to follow my heart. I believe that for everybody. That's not just a me thing. I believe that for everyone, that when we're all more heart-centered, we find more authenticity in our relationships. We find more authenticity within ourselves. We're more in tune with our truth, what we need, what we value, and what makes us unique. Plus a million other amazing things that come from the heart. So something about the last couple of years, I've been navigating this push and pull between acting from a place of my power and acting from a place of my heart, and knowing when to use each one. Now, what's interesting is the shadow effect of you being in your solar plexus all the time is the ego, the place of, when you're overprotecting yourself, or if you have trauma related to themes around power and confidence and self-trust and how you take action. All of those things are can be in the shadow of the solar plexus. And, since I started my business, I definitely can resonate with that. Like, where do I pull my energy from? How do I get through difficult days? When I'm lacking energy in my physical body, where do I pull energy from? I'm not pulling from source, I'm pulling from me, and I'm not supposed to do that. I don't think any of us are really supposed to do that for the most part. There's people who would argue differently, like professional athletes and stuff. Like, they have this brute force in their body that they build, which is so beautiful. But I even think still that is some kind of universal strength that they tap into. So I think that if you're struggling with gut issues, looking at the themes of the solar plexus are really, really important. And looking at it from a childhood perspective and an adult perspective, and maybe even patterns or relationships to things like power, confidence, self-trust, etc. Also, the big one for the solar plexus has to do with abuse. So it's important to look into emotional or physical or spiritual abuse when it comes to the solar plexus and how people have taken your power from you. So that's another really important one to look at. And I had to look at all these things myself, and I had to look at it from a family perspective, an ancestral perspective, a personal perspective, a relationship perspective, a health perspective. And at the end of the day, what I've realized is that I've got some ancestral trauma related to the war in Lebanon that has affected my place of personal power, and it shows up in relationships. And so sometimes in my close and intimate relationships, when I don't know how to navigate them, instead of moving from the heart, I move from the solar plexus in its shadow, meaning, what is my ego saying? Do I need to protect myself? Am I pushing people away? Am I pulling people in close? Am I fighting my heart? Do I not really understand boundaries very well? Like, man, boundaries, that is just like a lifelong lesson that I am going through. What are my boundaries, and emotional, physical boundaries? And who do I let in? And who takes my energy? And how do I give my energy away? And it's interesting because I went to see an osteopath in Italy with my sister, and the osteopath recommended that my biggest issue in my body was actually that I needed a psychologist to talk about how my whole life, all I've done is become really hypervigilant of the environment that I'm in. And I take on the things that I don't like to try to fix them because it's uncomfortable for me. It's uncomfortable as a child to watch turmoil happen in the space around you and then navigate that and not take it personally, especially as the oldest child, and try to fix it. You don't have to be an oldest child to go through that. You could be the youngest or the middle child. But for me personally, as the oldest of 5 kids in a emotionally unstable home at times, I would see a lot of sadness, a lot of pain. I would feel a lot, and I would take it upon myself to try to fix it. And I was powerless at every turn because I don't have the power to fix people. But it was this place of me trying to fix and fix and fix. So in my personal relationships, when I see something that I don't like, I try to fix and I fix, and it doesn't do anything. It actually enables other people's behavior at times, and it takes away from my personal sovereignty of moving through my emotions without disassociating. Like instead of disassociating with them, I should be sitting in my emotions. And that's really uncomfortable for me. And a lot of times my emotions are sitting right here in my gut. So I had to look at all of this stuff and take radical responsibility for myself and my healing and my emotions. And I also had to get very curious about things that I may have experienced that I don't have any memory of, but I know that that feeling is sitting in my body. And I had to take radical responsibility for the way I show up in relationships, which is that I have been essentially programmed to look for things that's wrong with people and try to fix it. Now, in my career, that is the greatest thing that I do is I use my intuition to figure out what's going on with people, and people pay me to literally tell them, this is what's wrong and here's how we're going to help you heal it. In my personal relationships, it doesn't always go so great. It hinders friendships. It can sometimes become a wedge in my relationship where, I don't have to be a fixer. I can just let people be who they are. It comes up with family, just like accepting people for who they are, letting them be who they are and not trying to fix it. And it's like this weird parentified pattern that I'm in. And now I'm having to look at my relationships to boundaries and where I feel power and where I don't feel power, and recalling my power back to myself, and where I call power and energy in from the universe and how I function energetically. And remember, emotions are energy. So this is not just like a spiritual woo-woo thing. You can't touch your emotions, but they're in you creating energy. When you're angry, you know that you want to just smush your face in a pillow and scream bloody murder. And when you do, what happens? The energy lightens, the emotion, it releases. So there's such a deep relationship between energy and emotions and the things that we experience that bring up emotions within us, and how we learn to navigate that. So this isn't just a physical perspective of what's going on in terms of my gut issues. That's been a long ass road. But it's also been how that the scientific part, the physical part, is really just surfing the same wave as the emotional parts of it. And I've had to look deeply at both. So now, moving forward, what my role really is in my healing is to, one, continue to take the supplements and all of the things that will physically help me get better, because now this emotional dis-ease has become a physical one. If you read Louise Hay's books, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You Can Heal Your Life. I read that like 8 or 9 years ago, changed my freaking life. So like it just opened my eyes up so much. Unfortunately, my deep spiritual awakening didn't come until a bit after that, but I started to kind of dip my toe into this stuff in like my mid-20s. But she says, these emotional roots at the core of our dis-ease physically, they're hand in hand. So now what I know is that I've got these kind of boundary and power dynamics, and where I pull my energy from and how I use my energy and where I use my energy and all that. I've got that to be aware of and look at and kind of reassess many different things with that in terms of how I live my life. But then I'm also, like I said, having to look at the physical part of it too. It's just this wild journey that we get to go on as humans, where we start to kind of realize that we are not separate from the emotions that we experience. And they have such a deep impact on us to the point where it can make us sick. That's the truth. So yeah, that is my long experience with gut issues. Now I know that it's a streptococcus issue that's overgrown in my body that I'm having to rebalance. and also the emotional stuff. And it's going to take time, and there's no magic cure for it. Although I am really excited because in a couple months from now, it's November. So next month, I am having a really interesting guest on the podcast. Her name is Darlene Green, and she is an advocate for stem cell light therapy. It's this company called Lightwave or Lightform or something like that. I just did like a pre-call to have her on the podcast in December, and I bought a month's long worth of the stem cell patches, and I'm going to try it for a month. A glutathione, anti-inflammation, an ice patch one, and like a generic stem cell patch. And I'm going to try it for a month. I'm going to track my progress. I'm going to share it with you guys on Instagram on my stories. I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting experience for me personally, because right now I feel like the biggest thing I'm managing is inflammation and certain aches and pains due to like the detoxing, and also, well, it's the detoxing, but it's also like the detoxing and the pain that's just like consistently still there at times. So we'll see. I'm really, really excited. When she comes on the podcast, we're going to talk about how trauma affects the body and then how the stem cells can help. And I'm obviously going to be honest with you guys about what the progress looks like, but it is really interesting to think about. The fact that maybe stem cells could help progress the healing of what's going on in my body. So I'm not saying that that's a magic pill, but I'm definitely saying I'm sure it's going to freaking help. I've done a ton of research on it since I talked with her, and there's a lot of positive benefits to stem cell light therapy. So I interview her on December 20th. So it'll probably come out in the new year. We'll see what the holiday schedule is like. With my brand new podcast editor. I just hired a podcast editor to come on and help me, which is so exciting. I'm so ready for this. And I hired a VA, a virtual assistant. So y'all, we're having like a real ass business here. It's like amazing to think about, which is going to give me more time to write my book and take clients and interview more people. And it's just going to be great. I'm really excited for all of this free space that is coming as I draw boundaries in my life. Like I'm just starting to see it unfold. So yeah, hopefully that answers your guys' questions about my experience with the carnivore diet, the SIBO. Make sure you buy that book, Healing SIBO, if you are diagnosed with SIBO. And I'm going to end the episode with this. Please work with a medical professional, a functional medicine doctor. Find someone highly regarded in your area. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, it's worth the investment. Yes, it will change your life. Sure, you can do things on your own. Reach out to a medical professional in the functional medicine space. If you're like, I know that I've had issues for a long time. Would you do a sliding scale for me? Would you let me do payments? Like, people are usually more than willing to help others out financially, especially in our economic times right now. So don't assume that you can't get the help or the health benefits that you need just because they're a functional doctor and they're expensive and they're not covered under your insurance. There are always ways to work with people. All you got to do is ask. All right. And it is possible to heal. Like, I believe that so deeply that if I just continue to listen to the downloads that I get and the feelings and to hold space for everything going on within me physically and emotionally, it's inevitable that there will be healing and it will happen, and it just takes time. And if you need a gut healing cheerleader on the sidelines, I volunteer as tribute because I know exactly what it's like to go through all of this. And it can be a very arduous journey to heal from the gut stuff. It can be up and down experience. It is absolutely not linear. It never has been, never will be. And healing your body will never be. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is hope. Thanks so much for joining this week's episode. If you liked it, I want to announce to you that I'm actually making a big change in my giveaways each month. So in the past, I was giving away a free 2-hour family constellation therapy for anyone who rated, subscribed, and reviewed the podcast, screenshotted that, and sent it to my Instagram DMs. I give away one at the end of each month. I just gave away one in October, but I've decided to switch now. I'm using my energy a little bit differently, from an FCT to an intuitive reading, which is a phenomenal way to kind of dip your toe into what it's like to work with me, to kind of get an introductory idea of maybe where ancestral blocks might be, because my intuition kind of works specifically with like the ancestral trauma, and helping you connect with family members and information. So if that's something that's really interesting to you, if you've always wanted to try an intuitive reading and you find yourself in these like family dynamics that you're kind of unsure how to navigate, all you got to do is subscribe, rate, and review to this podcast, screenshot it, send it to me on Instagram in my DMs so I know where to find you when you win, because I announce the winner on my Instagram stories. It's really that simple. And then you're off to the races. So thanks for joining me again. And I hope to see you next week on next week's episode with my next guest. See you.